Hey everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. Today I have a special journey that we're going to talk through. Joe Militello is the Chief People Officer at Mechanical Orchard. He actually has been at Pivotal Labs, for those of you that remember that amazing organization. I met him at PagerDuty. He was a Chief People Officer there, and so now he's at Mechanical Orchard as the Chief People Officer, kind of coming together with the old gang again, starting up something new. And what I thought would be interesting, and what he brought to the table actually as an idea, is the evolution of his relationship throughout all these amazing hyperscaling organizations, his relationship with culture. So we're going to talk about how he's seen it, and I think you will see yourselves in this, because I feel like everybody kind of goes through this journey, and he's got some language around it and thinking about phases and whatnot. So, uh, Joe, thanks for coming on Great Mondays Radio. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, great to be here, Josh. Thanks for having me.
So, so give me a quick background for everybody. I kind of did an overview. So you were at Pivotal Labs or Pivotal Software?
Yeah, so kind of winding back the clock a little bit, after college, I was in the Marines for 4 years. After college, I went to work for a great company called EMC for 13 years, and then I was part of a spin out that included Pivotal Labs, but then we formed a company called Pivotal Software. Was there for 7 years. We took it public, then was acquired. And then most recently, before where I am today, I was at PagerDuty for 4.5 years.
And that was right after they went public. You joined, I think,
I
right?
joined PagerDuty about 9 months after public. They went public, and 6 months or 6 weeks before the pandemic.
Right. So perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. Great. So, and then usually we were talking before we started recording, usually folks don't jump back into a startup company, right? So Mechanical Orchard is something that's much smaller than you've been at for a while.
That's true. Yeah, I think the driving factor was probably two things. One is they're trying to solve a technical problem that hasn't been solved yet, and I just love to be part of organizations that are trying to solve hard technical problems. I've spent my entire career post-military around developers and technology, so that really got my interest. And the other is, I know the leadership team, and so it's just been able to just hit the ground running and just really compress the kind of normal assimilation of trying to figure out your way around, around the office, if you will.
Right, you have that trust, that shared experience that helps a ton, I'm sure. Um, so so let's dive right into it. You have been in the HR space. You've been a people leader for a long time, and though how you have experienced and how you have thought about culture has changed over the years. So talk to us a little bit about what that sort of the first, I guess you're calling it phases or something, the first chapter of your experience with culture. What was that like?
Yeah, so I've been really fortunate for my entire career to work with companies that just had amazing cultures and great values. And when I think about my relationship with culture, it is certainly has evolved. And when I think about my first job outside of the military with a company called EMC, like they had this amazing culture, and the culture was really very much around customer driven. And I know a lot of companies say, customer driven, is or customer's importance. But
Yeah.
what I felt when I was at that company was just it was above and beyond. And
Hmm.
if something happened to happen with the client or the customer, like folks felt empowered to just make it happen. And it was just really, really kind of felt throughout the 30,000 person organization that if the customer needed something, you dropped it and you went and did it. And so my relationship with the culture at that point in time was more of appreciation of it. Like I knew it existed. And I would say, and we can talk about my journey, but really early on, I would say I was like a passenger with the company culture. Like it was everyone appreciated it. It was everyone enjoyed it. They talked about it. The customers felt it. But it was very much I felt like a participant in it versus
Mhm.
journey where, now like how do I use culture? And so that was really my first experience with company culture.
So, and I think a lot of folks have that too, where they where they experience it, and it could be a good. You happen to have a good experience with it, but probably a lot of folks first job or two out of college, they're gonna go, "Oh, this place is great. Oh my gosh, what is this?" Right? Like they are experiencing it, whether they're aware of it or not. And so you happen to join an organization that had a strong culture that was moving in the right direction. What would you say the definitive the culture, so the customer first was kind of that definitive piece of it. Was that like I guess I talk about culture as sort of this, when you're doing it well, sort of this upward spiral, right? If you don't put energy into it, entropy is going to work against you and you're going to kind of spin out. But when you have sort of at that certain level, 30,000 folks, the customer first, was that something that you were ever like when you were onboarded, it was like, here we are customer first, or was it modeled by managers or was it executives? Like, how did you learn it and how did they reinforce it?
It was through storytelling. It was through storytelling of where, a client, had a business need or they were in trouble or, maybe we fell short in terms of meeting the customer's expectations. And the stories just, whether it was through company town halls or through the executives, telling the stories throughout the functions
Mm,
around like what we did to go above and beyond. And so everyone felt this empowerment that if something wasn't going well, like you needed to make it right and you needed to make the customer happy. And it was very much around the long-term relationship, not about, getting a deal done, not about like maximizing kind of short-term, interest or financial gain. It was absolutely around the long-term relationship of it. And so it was
mm.
really done through storytelling. Um,
That's interesting. It sort of reminds me of that kind of that sort of typical definition of culture. It's the way things are done around here, right? Like humans learn how things happen through stories. And that could be formally, like you said, in the town hall, or maybe informally. Hey, last time we did X, Y, and Z, or I jumped and did these things, and that was rewarded either explicitly or implicitly.
Yeah, and I would say another was, and I would say EMC was really kind of early adopt, were really early leaders with this, was that within the people organization, there was a lot of stories and discussions around how the people team was getting involved with customers and how they
Oh.
were helping, get deals done and through their relationships, through their relationships with the client. And so it was very much acknowledge that whenever a topic of customer came up like that, that automatically took precedent.
That's interesting. Would you say that's unique? I mean, I assume you're bringing that up because it's unique, but like that the people team would be facing the customer because usually we're like, well, those folks over there outside the people team, right? Those are
I
the
would
customer facing ones.
I would say that was unique, 20 years ago. I'm hoping it's not as unique today, and I can give, examples both at Pivotal and PagerDuty where both
Yeah.
the people team have gotten directly involved with customers. And I can tell you, and you talk to anyone member of my team, the day that they get to enter that one day of the week where they get to interact with a customer of the company and get to step behind the back office, that
Yeah.
is like the highlight of their month, right?
Yeah.
Because you get to actually go from the behind the scenes to kind of the front lines, if you will.
Well, let's build that into kind of the evolution of your experience. So phase one, you're a passenger. So phase or chapter two,
Yeah,
what
so
what happens?
stage one, I would say, is like your acknowledgement, that there isn't a culture, whether it's good or bad, but that's like
Right.
your awareness.
Yeah.
I would say like the for stage two, it's really around ability to talk about like key aspects of the culture with a level of maybe clarity and accuracy. So that
Mm.
you can get a little specific on why do you feel the way you do, right? So from this awareness to getting a little bit more specific. And my relationship, like I said, has evolved, and maybe like the way I think about stage three is really where I've been able to become more consciously shaping and influencing it with intentionality, and not just through kind of my routine behavior of being a passenger or a participant, but being very specific around like what are the behaviors in our culture and how do they achieve the business outcome? So that stage three is being much more intentional around shaping, influencing, and then drawing that connection to the business outcome.
So, tell me a little bit about chapter two or stage two first, the clarity. So, for you, after you had this experience of being a passenger, oh wow, this is interesting. There is a thing called culture. What starts to reveal itself when
Yeah.
a quick sort of kind of additional information. When I was in school, I learned that the definition of an expert is someone who can see patterns. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's what you're starting to see. It's like you're like, oh, it's not just this vague cloud around us. That's actually there are things that are contributing to that.
Yeah.
What did you see? What was starting to what were some of the first things that you started to
Yeah.
reveal
Yeah, and
themselves
I'll
to?
give you an example. Like when I was at Pivotal, I was definitely in stage three and progressing towards stage three.
Yeah.
We had three values. Do the right thing, do what works, and be kind. And everyone knew them inside and out. Those three, they were short, they were clear, they tied to our company's strategy. And what I started to see in that stage was the impact that it was having on retention and the impact that it was having in retention of employees in a positive way, and what I was seeing in terms of attracting talent. And when employees would show up for interviews and they would talk about the company values, they would be very proud and they rattle off the three, one, two, three. And candidates felt that. And so that's when I started seeing this kind of the signals and being able to start identifying some of the behaviors behind those three values and what made them so powerful and what made people so proud of those three values.
Interesting. So it's not just the values, but that they were sort of the employees integrated those into their being. They that was sort of part of their identity at
Right. And you
Pivotal.
start recognizing why you feel the way you do about the culture. Right.
Ah, okay, yeah.
So I so th I'll take any one of the three in that example. So do what works, right? At the heart of that is keep it simple, right? And so when you see folks moving quickly but in a good way, right? And they're being decisive, they're taking action, they're not overcomplicating things, right? Those are things in pattern or behavior you start seeing of like, well, that's why I like this value, right? Because folks are not either keeping it simple or be kind, right? And we did a lot of work around trying to distinguish the difference between being kind, being nice. There is a distinction, and I know you have opinions on this, Josh. Um, and like what are those behaviors? So that's really what I mean by stage two is really starting to identify why you feel the way you do about the
Yeah, right. You're like,
good or
oh,
bad, good or bad.
yeah, it feels good. You're like, oh, because of these things, and those values happen to be the labels, right? Those are the little storytelling hangers, right? That we can kind of like put our mental hooks into and go, oh yeah, 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 that makes sense. Which is how I think about values as well. It's this their guidance and their ways that, as humans, we have this special tool called language, and that language be is able to wrap up ideas, and that's really powerful. So I love that. So now you're moving from two to three, so you have this clarity. Oh, these values are why I feel this way. So what then? You started to talk, you're like, oh, the outcome is this moving quick with intention. And
Right.
so when you talk about shaping the culture in that next phase, talk to me a little bit about that shift that you made and how you started to take that into your own hands.
I think it's really going from being passive and a good team member, right?
Hmm.
They all shape
Hmm.
the culture. Like every employee shapes it.
Yep. Yep.
So, but what I mean by passive is in moving to active is how do I have an impact greater than just myself and how I show up? And then also the connection to business outcomes. So, for example, right, a cultural area that I've worked on in a couple of companies is around decision making or accountability, and how do they show up in our culture, and what are the behaviors we expect to make sure that we can have durable decisions, right? Make sure that, a culture of where everyone feels accountable to the business outcome, recognizing that if we get those two right, and there's others, but get those two right, it's going to allow us to have more business velocity, right? It's going to allow us to move more quickly as a business. It's going to allow us to better serve our customers. It's going to get us closer to achieving our full potential as a company. So it's moving to that, oh, these are the things, these are the accelerants, if you will, of our culture that are either slowing us down today, but if we get them right, they'll allow us to move faster, or they're going well, but we know we can go, we can improve upon them. And so it starts becoming like, oh, if we get these couple things right, we're going to be
Hmm.
able to drive a lot faster as a company and really help get to our business outcomes.
So this seems like a maybe even a universal principle, right? So it's making good decisions, good durable decisions. So if when you come into an organization, you're like, this is what I expect of, this is how we achieve velocity. So then how do you talk through kind of, okay, that's the outcome that we want. That's the behavior that we want, right? Culture is about the behavior. So then back that up to how do you implement or how do you start to think about whether it's values or other frameworks or other storytelling or other town halls or whatever it might be. What are the ways that you then become a culture influencer greater than yourself?
Right. And that's really getting into stage four, right? I think that's stage three is really around like identifying the behaviors and working at it. The stage four, which I think you're kind of alluding to, or at least the way I think about it,
Great. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
is
Tell
taking a
stage
step
four.
back and saying, like, what is the strategic vision for the culture? Knowing all the building blocks and the connective tissues and connecting it to business outcomes and really leading and bringing others along.
Uh-huh.
And so some of the things that I look for, and certainly, being here now for, 7 or so weeks, starts just with some fundamental things about just the organization. Of course, there's a lot of listening that goes on
Yep.
in the early days, right?
Yep. Yep.
But I think really being clear on, and the space seemed very kind of trite, but very, very clear in terms of like your why as a company, like your purpose, right? You absolutely need to know your purpose. Like, why do we exist, right? One of the things I'm doing right now is assessing the values and listening and talking to folks. And so what do folks think is the current state uh, versus the aspirational state? And
Mm-hmm.
Josh, I'm sure you've had a lot of clients where
Mm-hmm.
leadership team thinks, "Oh, this is our culture." And you talk to the employees, you do surveys, and it's not universally that,
Right, right.
right? And so there's a culture of like what you want to be versus your aspirational. Then there's, driving some clarity around kind of your mission,
Mm-hmm.
like what do we actually do as a company? Um, there is this aspect of, and this all ties to culture. I know I'm talking about some organizational
Yeah,
things.
yeah, for sure.
This all ties or to making sure your culture is an accelerant of the business. Another aspect is really being clear around like what are your strategic anchors as a company, right? You get these things right, it's going to help you execute on your strategy.
Mm.
There's another really aspect of like where I think culture and business execution comes together is I think it's really important for a company to be very, very clear on like what's most important now. Because one of the things I've seen at really large companies, and even here a little bit, is you know, you if the CEO gets up or we get in front of a town hall and we say, hey, the most important thing right now is this, but other departments are like, wait a minute, I don't see myself in that, and I don't see
Mm.
myself there. And it becomes very tricky where you want to be able to communicate to the company like this vision. It's really important for folks to know where they fall in. But what's even is equally as critical is like the company needs to know like what's most important now. And if that's not your department, then your job is to support them, even if it's not your day to day. So let's say, for example, say you're a multi-product company
Yep.
and the CEO is saying, everything we do, all of you are important, but getting this particular product to market quickly as possible, even though this product over here might be generating hundreds of millions of dollars, what's most important is like we have to get this other product or this other feature out to market,
Yeah.
or we're going to be irrelevant, right? Or we're not going to be sticky enough. the folks over here who are generating the cash flow with the existing product, they have to be on board with that and not feel like they've been marginalized. And so that's
Mm,
with leadership. And then that other aspect of kind of that healthy organization where culture comes, then it's just being very clear on roles and responsibilities, like who does what, who owns what, and that accountability. So I think you wrap that all together
hmm.
and then you use culture to make sure, there's clear communication, accountability, decision making.
So you described it, and it's almost as you've described your journey, it's almost like you've gone from, this 30,000 person company, and then you're kind of going, the companies are getting smaller as you're kind of
Yeah, I don't know what
going
that
on.
means.
I don't know what that, I'm not saying there's any meaning. I don't saying there's any, what that reflection of you, but what you have the opportunity now, and this is you said this to me, but before we started recording, that you are now taking all of that experience and knowledge and are able to from the beginning. And how many employees at Mechanical Orchard now?
About 100.
100 people. Great. So 100 people. So that's early days, right? We talk about, the culture is kind of a founder's culture at 50, and then it kind of grows. And then if you don't pay attention at 200 or 250, someone looks around, they go, uh-oh, something's not right. So you're right in that like formative moment. And so you're taking all of your previous experience and you have that inherent trust and you're bringing that forward now. And so what you just described sounds to me like that's the vision that you have for your role at Mechanical Orchard. You're looking at the strategy, you're working with the executive team and kind of anchoring it all together. Is that did I hear that correctly?
You did hear that correctly. And the way I think about every role at the C level in a company, and maybe it varies a little bit by size, but I'd say generally speaking, this would be applicable, I think, to your entire audience, is that everyone's a business leader first, right? Whether it's the CMO, the CFO, the CRO, the CTO,
Hmm.
the chief people officer, is really to think about the business first and understand like where the business is going and how things work. And then yes, I have my day-to-day responsibilities, and a lot of it is around how to hire the best and get them as productive as possible, how we
Mm-hmm.
reduce friction
Mm-hmm.
as we
Mm-hmm.
scale, and building this amazing culture that's going to be that jet fuel to allow that car to go really, really fast. But really my orientation, and I would say all chief people officers are starting to have this orientation, and I'm certainly not the trendsetter here, but really thinking about showing up as a business leader first versus a functional leader, right? If you want that seat at the table, you have to show up as a business leader first, in my opinion.
Tell me, well, I mean, what is define the difference? What does that mean to be a business leader first?
Yeah, I would say what that means is participate in the business conversation, right? And the things that I'm thinking about aren't always around specific to kind of the HR function, if you will, right? And
Got it.
so
Yeah.
um, I'll try to give you, and I'll give you give you a great example. So, about a year ago, we were looking at some data within the organization, and we didn't see our productivity data and sales overall where we wanted it to be. Can't go into too many specifics, but it just wasn't
Sure.
where
Yeah,
we
yeah.
wanted to be. And granted, we're at the company we're at was a growth mindset. And so it was always like, how do we get better? So it just wasn't, where we wanted it to be. And so the approach that, I took was, well, let's take a step back and look at all the different things that are factoring into why we're not getting to where we want to be from a productivity standpoint. I
Hmm.
think like if I was just like a stay in your lane HR person, I would say, well, let's just, anyone that's not meeting their quota, they need to go,
Right.
and we need to hire better, right? Right? That's kind of like a stay in your lane. Like, well, of course, if productivity is not good, fire the sales reps that are not productive and hire new ones. That would be kind
Yep.
of like maybe a very kind of stay
Yep.
in your lane HR.
Yep. Yep.
I would say a business leader would take a step back and say, okay, start asking the whys. Like, why is this? What are some of the things that are contributing to it? And really bringing that systems thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you start identifying like all the things that are contributing to not getting to the business outcome you want, right? You have outcomes and then you have leading indicators or input metrics, and really understanding like how all those impact the outcome that you want.
Yeah.
And then being able to, and when you start putting together plans in place to improve it, you're approaching it with the why, right? And why we're doing this and how this is going to help the business move forward versus, maybe more stay in your lane, traditional, and your function is like sales productivity is not good. So you go run to your team of like HRBPs, give me a list of
Yeah.
who's not quota.
Who are
Let's
we putting
on
on
a pace and get
performance
them in
improvement
90
plan?
days. Talent of acquisition, you know, we need to improve the screening process, and onboarding, and we need to get better reps. Like,
But you may not solve the problem that
but
way,
you may
right?
not
Because the
solve the
problem
problem.
still could exist in the wires.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's a holistic, a business leader. So what I hear you saying is like in your head, the model of a great executive is someone who can be can be a business leader, have a holistic view of the world as the company as the world and how it connects and make that connection to the specific uh, job, the people leader job, or whatever that job is. And so you're actually able to make those connections because there's everybody else is also thinking about these things. Hey, da 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 da. But in order to make that true, in order to affect that, you go, uh-oh, we got to think about the sales numbers or whatever it might be. Let's solve it from a business leader standpoint. It's a holistic, it's sort of this bouncing back and forth between very specific tactical and holistic. Let's really ask why.
And another big piece that I would add to that that really draws that distinction between like a functional leader and a business leader is having this mindset. And I've talked to the team here about this, is you, especially at the C-suite level, you need to prioritize the team that you're on versus the team that you lead. So let that sink in for a second. You, as an executive team, we prioritize the team that we're on versus the team you lead. And I love the team I lead. I have amazing, amazing people team that I've worked with at all the companies I've been part of. I'm dear friends with all of them. Well, not all of them, but many of them. But it really, my orientation and my expectations of my peers at the C-suite level is that we are the team first. We are that first team. And you have to prioritize the team that you're on. So I'll give you an example, right? You're going through budgeting and planning process, right? We all love going through it every year.
My favorite time of
And
year.
every time here. And candidly, it should be an ongoing process. But and you know, the philosophy of the organizations I've been part of is that from a G&A, general and administrative, HR, finance, IT, legal, right? We have to be as efficient as possible with our resources and effective with our resources. And so that when we're having conversations around how do we make sure we can fund the right innovation and make sure we have the right level of engineers and technologists, and that we have enough of the right people to service our customers, right? The people team in G&A, like it's our responsibility to be both effective and efficient so that when it comes to funding the things that are actually going to move the business forward, like we are running a lean shop. It's not about like, hey, how many resources I can have, right? It's not about me building my own kind of, fiefdom, if you will,
Yeah.
right? I'm prioritizing the team that I'm on. I'm thinking company first before I start thinking about myself, right? It's company, it's the first team. And so
Yeah.
that orientation really takes you from like that functional leader to like thinking as a business leader. And so it's not about like how many HR people I have. It doesn't
Yeah.
that not that doesn't matter. That doesn't measure your worth and it doesn't measure your impact per se. Yes, there's a correlation in terms of how much work you can get done, of course, but it's really around that orientation of like, yes, if funding needed to go anywhere, it should go for building product or selling product
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
and
I'm
I've never
flat.
felt reach. And with that mentality, I can say, Josh, in all my careers, like I've never felt like really resource constrained. Yeah, can I take an extra headcount or two? Of course, like I can,
Yeah.
HR people are great, at spinning up activities, but it's really around, and then allows the people team to really focus on the things that matter, right? Not, really being clear around, the core set of things that are really going to move the
Yeah.
needle.
I am flashing back on like scenario after scenario where that the opposite was the case, right? With either clients that I worked for or companies that I worked for. And it's so clarifying when you say it like that because what happens the other direction, what tends to happen is we retreat into our this is my team and my team is my identity. And I think about the one time we were working, I was at a brand strategy firm and we were working for HP, the one of the corporate brand guys, and he was telling us a story how he had to tell the tax team that they couldn't have their own logo because it was like HP tax. They were like, "Look, we're doing this," and which is funny, right? But it's also very telling of sort of this human psychology of like you live inside this organization and you want to have your own identity. And so when you're talking about prioritize the team you're on, all that, it sort of just relieves you of that. And like, hey, this is where we're focused. And that just gives such power and revelatory sort of power to that kind of how do you make business decisions? And that is so yeah, that's great. I'm going to take that away for sure. The four phases of culture experience and your prioritize the team you're on. Those are going to be the two things I take away from our conversation, Joe.
And when we think about culture, right, is the behaviors you see when it's working well and the leaders are showing up as a team versus to your maybe some of the flashbacks you're having, behaviors when folks maybe retreat, that's the culture. And those behaviors manifest themselves in ways that maybe are preventing the company from reaching its full potential because there's friction,
Yep.
right? And friction is the biggest, enemy of a company trying to go fast.
Yep. Yep. Fantastic. So I'm just going to go back and I wrote down the notes around your kind of your evolution of relationship to culture. So you were a passenger and then experiencing it, and then you revealed you had clarity around the pieces and the parts. And then once you were able to say, "Oh, I can see the elements of this," then I can start shaping it with intention, have a larger impact, and then finally you're able to connect it to the strategic vision. And that's kind of that Maslow's hierarchy of culture, maybe
Yeah, it's
we
just
could
my
call it that.
relationship with it. That's how my relationship has evolved. And
Yeah,
yes, I would say that final stage is kind of where I feel that culture is really kind of that business accelerant. And how
Milit
to
Militello's hierarchy of culture is what we'll
there you
call
go. Should we
it.
copyright that? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it. You have to credit Joe if you're going to use it.
It's okay.
Joe
You can borrow it if it's self.
Militello, thanks. Yeah, well, I'm going to create a graphic for it. Joe Militello is the Chief People Officer at Mechanical Orchard. Watch out, they're small now, but obviously they're going to be growing. So we'll keep an eye on you. If you want to learn about more about Mechanical Orchard, you can go check out mechanical.orchard or mechanical-orchard.com. And Joe, it was amazing having you on. This was a really, really wonderful. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks, Josh. Great being here. Appreciate it.